quite like this.
Literacy in Jamaica is a problem. What? With those 15 years and older who have the ability to read, write, and understand a sentence about their everyday life, only about 89% of Jamaicans 15 and over fall into that category. So what this means is that we're lagging significantly behind several of our Caribbean counterparts. And here at home, if you just assess Jamaica by itself where its literacy is concerned, you realize that we don't have enough quality material coming out of these schools and transitioning into the work world. So how do we fix this? It's the conversation I'm going to strike up with two experts on the show. Lead Story Monday looks at literacy in Jamaica and how we can fix perennial problems. Welcome to Lead Story on this Monday. When UNESCO did a survey in or about 1970 in Jamaica, it found that only between 40 and 50% of Jamaicans 15 and over were literate. 40 to 50%. That was in 1970. By 1999, after a series of targeted interventions, the literacy rate jumped to about 80%. Very, very big jump in 29 years, from 40 to 50 to about 80%. But between 1999 and now, it has not grown as fast. We are only now about at 89%. And if you track from 1999 to now, that's about 26 years. So we've moved about 9 percentage points in 26 years compared to the 39 that we would have moved from 1970 to 1999. It is a cause for concern because we see it in our students, so many of them passing through the early childhood, primary and secondary school system, unable to defend themselves, unable to read, write, and comprehend. And that's a problem we're looking to tackle on this show this evening. But in case you came in late and you don't know the context in which we speak, we have context for you.
In communities across Jamaica, the sound of children stumbling through basic sentences in the classroom is a quiet alarm that has been ringing for years. Teachers see it daily, bright eyes dulled by confusion, children unable to decode a simple sentence or write a clear thought. The literacy crisis in Jamaica isn't new, but its consequences are becoming impossible to ignore. From rural schools to bustling campuses in Kingston, teachers report the same pattern: children advancing through grades without grasping the fundamentals of reading and comprehension. A recent article highlights Pembroke Hall High as one such school with 70% of its grade 7 students reportedly unable to read, or they can only do so at a grade 3 level. At the core of the issue is the suspicion that many students have unidentified special education needs, yet there is a critical shortage of trained special education teachers to support them. The report of the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission, JETC, stated that most students at the primary level are barely literate. According to the JETC, the 2019 Primary Exit Profile PEP examinations revealed that 33% of students cannot read or can barely do so. 56% of students cannot write or can barely do so, and 58% of students can't or can barely find information on a topic. For secondary schools, the data showed something similar. Approximately 32,617 students sat the CSEC examinations, 54% females, 45% males, but only 42.5% passed 5 or more subjects, including English and/or mathematics. Even more concerning, just 28% met the benchmark of passing 5 or more subjects with both English and mathematics. At the post-secondary level, results were similarly poor. CAPE exam pass rates have been consistently low and are declining, with only 45% of students achieving a passing grade for the diploma certificate. Despite the challenges, there are flickers of hope. Some schools have embraced new methods, blending creative arts and storytelling with reading instruction to better engage students. Some Jamaicans have suggested that the literacy crisis is not a failure of our children. Rather, they say it is a failure of systems, adding that unless it is addressed with urgency and empathy, it will continue to undermine everything the country hopes to build. We discuss on Lead Story.
Yeah, tragic. But all is not lost. After the break, our experts.
Join my private room. Only $1,000 for a grand time.
That I know me. We never said that. But who go and believe me?
That is correct. $4,350,000. Yes, go ahead. $4 million? I never approved that.
Yes, me go doctor tomorrow. So me have to get the money today, no longer. Then no me face that. Me never make no record or beg nobody no money.
Deepfakes are AI-generated images and videos made to look and sound like people we know and trust. They're used to spread misinformation, destroy reputations, and are used to commit fraud and scams. Don't fall victim to deepfakes. Protect yourself. For more information, visit broadcastingcommission.org or scan the QR code on screen.
From politics to global events, from social issues to breaking news, Lead Story Prime dives deeper, cuts through the noise, and uncovers the stories that shape your world. Join us every Tuesday at 8 p.m. for Lead Story Prime with me, George Davis, for an hour of incisive analysis, expert interviews, and unparalleled coverage of the issues you care about. Lead Story Prime, your front row seat to the most compelling discussions. Lead Story Prime, where the truth comes first. Only on CVM TV.
Welcome back to Lead Story here on this morning. To my guests now, Dr. Yewande Lewis-Folcom is a literacy lecturer at the UWI Mona, and Linvern Wright is the principal of William Lee Memorial High School. He's also the head of the Jamaica Association of Principals of Secondary Schools. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening to you both, to the listeners.
Thank you very much. Dr. Lewis-Folcom, I understand that you're under the weather. Very much appreciative I am that you could soldier on and assist us this evening. From your reading of how we have moved over time to lift the literacy rate, what is it that we've not been getting quite right, causing us to be stubbornly at 89 for so many years after making that big jump from 1970 to 1999?
That's a really good question. I think there are multiple responses to that. One is that how you define literacy and how you measure it changes the outcome of it. So the expectations of literacy perhaps in the 1950s, 1960s is different from the expectations of literacy now for 2025. And then secondly, in order for your children at the early childhood primary to continue to be literate, you have to have good pedagogy consistently. And I think there are pockets of good literacy pedagogy, but it hasn't been as consistent as it could be. And I think that has impacted the literacy levels. So I'll stop there.
Yeah. Well, fine. A lot to consider from what you said. So where it is that you think the focus ought to be to get us moving in the direction so that in relatively reasonable time we can be rubbing shoulders with the likes of the Cubas and the Barbados and the Antiguas of this region, which have 100% literacy?
Right. Well, one of the things is that the conveyor belt system of just moving students along. And what I'm happy about is that when I read the day from the Pembroke Hall principal, it is clear that his school and other schools like his have paused and said, we can't do business as usual. We have to intervene at the school level in various ways. So whether that means tailoring the curriculum to meet our students' specific needs, reading challenges, we are going to do that. So I think that is one thing that is happening that is good. The second thing that we need to do is to emphasize more reading at the early childhood level. The curriculum at the early childhood level is play-based, and that's a good thing. But there needs to be balance, and I've written research about that along with one of my colleagues, Professor Zoya Kincaid-Clark. But reading needs to be a very explicit focus from the early childhood into lower primary grades 1, 2, and 3. And I think the Ministry of Education has been doing something about that. In fact, I'm just coming off of training, a series of workshops put on by the National Literacy Team from the Ministry of Education. And we are being trained to teach teachers in grades 1, 2, and 3 to teach explicitly reading. So I think there are many other things, but I think those two things. The last thing that I would say is that leadership is important. I have an MPhil student who is looking at literacy leadership, because what you want is to have the principal of a school have that literacy vision and reinforce it throughout the school, so all the teachers are speaking the same language.
Yes.
When it comes to reading.
Yes. Principal Wright, the situation is grim, and I find it to be very much unfair that persons like yourself, you're the principal of a secondary school, you have to be farming time to deal with reading and writing of students that you're getting at 12 years old at grade 7, when the fundamentals don't exist for a lot of the children. Is it my imagination, or is this a reality that many school principals face in the secondary school system, of having to deal with remedial reading when they should be getting students that they're preparing to transition to the next level?
Now, a significant number of them have had to do that, and people like Principal Claude Ellis, Reverend Claude Ellis, is someone who, as our friend is saying, he had to pause, and many principals have to pause. But one of the things that you might recognize with what Claude has said is that the kinds of diagnoses that are necessary for them to understand what is happening with these children, to ensure that the right kind of intervention happens for them, is something that sometimes can be very expensive. And it can be overwhelming because of the number of students that they have to deal with. So when a school like his has something like a 70% students reading below grade level, it's problematic. Dr. Louis Fulcom will tell you, for example, that if it is that you really want literacy instruction to be effective, it can't be more than 12 to maybe about 15 students, if so many.
Yes.
If it is that you look at students who are at a particular level.
Yes.
Many of these schools are still dealing with students like 30 or 40 in each class.
Yes.
With teachers who don't have the training for literacy, but really they're trying to do some training with them to help them to get there. But one of the things that I think we have got to really pay attention to, and I've been paying lip service to, Doc spoke about that too. If we really don't decide to spend properly on early childhood and primary education. Our education system, the spending is lopsided.
Yes.
We have a problem when they come to high school of children choosing. Not so much because the school that they're going has better pedagogy than any other, but because it has a tradition of having got a set of students chosen in a apartheid system to say, okay, we go to that particular school.
Yes.
And we have lauded that kind of thing in Jamaica for how many years?
Yes.
Where we have to go, the problem that I think we want to have is to ensure that we front load the funding. Early childhood, primary education, ensure that pedagogy is as good as Doc is saying, and then move to ensuring that the problem we have is that they are going to these schools and we learn ultimately that many of the teachers are pretty much the same, the colleges they go are the same, the training is the same. But what happens is that if you get a child who is not reading at level, that child is not going to do well at CXC anyway.
Yes.
Because the fact you have started them at a disadvantage, you have started the school at a disadvantage. And then the other thing is that those schools end up, so schools like Pembroke Hall end up with the same $17,000 per child per annum.
Yes.
As would a school that, for example, Wilma's, who really doesn't need that. Plus, such schools will get far more assistance to assist students in terms of any issues they have. So one of the things I think is that we're not really dealing with many things. And one of the things we don't want to talk about is funding. Literacy leadership and starting students early is one of the things. But since 2016, we have had an increase in the amount that goes to high schools and primary schools. Very little has happened since that. A primary school is getting $3,000 per child per annum in terms of operational costs.
Yeah.
So the same teachers in primary schools who want to teach these people reading have to be fundraising.
Yes.
They have to be there, raising money to help a child to go on a little trip to build their their social capital to help them to read a little better.
Yes.
Those are the things that I think we're not paying attention to. And final point I want to make, I heard the Prime Minister saying we spent $90 billion on security. We all want a peaceful Jamaica, but a sustainable peace is not going to be built on our capital expenditure in security being bigger than our capital expenditure in education. This year it was $4 billion.
Yes.
I'm sure it's more than that for security.
Yes.
We have got to do better than that.
Hear you on that. Hear you on that. Let's take the break and come right back. Linvern Wright having a lot to say. Dr. Louis Fulcom also contributing substantially to the conversation that we're having about literacy in the Jamaican society.
Come and tell me what is bothering you, Krishna. Come on.
If Mummy wins tomorrow's competition, then she will leave and take me away.
I won't allow that.
So the court gives the order that from today, Krishna's legal guardian will be her father, Mr. Sagar Chaturvedi.
I don't want to hear Ganga's name again as long as I live.
Ganga.
Brought to you by
Hyundai or Hyundai.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winford Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Rise with Sunrise. Spend your Tuesday with Miss Kitty and Dennis. First up, we learn how to navigate property valuation with BCIC. Then we head to the kitchen for something finger-licking good. We're off to school for Fully Bright, and we'll wrap your morning in Sunrise Freshers. You've never seen a sunrise quite like this.
Welcome back to Lead Story here on CVM TV. Speaking with literacy lecturer at the UWI, Mona Dr. Yewande Louis Fulcom. And principal of William the Memorial High School and the head of the Jamaica Association of Principals of Secondary Schools, Linvern Wright. Linvern, you threw me there because I was just going to come to you and then I saw your chair empty and just by magic you reappeared. Hear me on this one now. Hear me on this one now. Must there be, along with the measures and the approaches that you have suggested and that Dr. Lewis Folcom has suggested, must there need to be an accompanying reconditioning led by our government to say to parents, the whole concept of arrested development is wrong and you're looking at it the wrong way. So if we are to hold your child back at primary level to get the fundamentals right before we allow that child to move with a view to transitioning to secondary school, understand that it is for the greater good, because I get the impression in Jamaica that there has been a decades-long generational resistance to a child being held back to fix anything, and it is seen as arrested development in a negative sense. Is this also a very small but perhaps very important part of the reconditioning that is needed in this push towards higher literacy?
Maybe, but I don't know that is necessarily the approach that has to be taken. What really we have got to go to is proper funding and proper pedagogy, because a good teacher, right? If it is at a reach a point where we're recruiting well, where we're training people and giving people the kinds of training that's necessary. So, for example, I really believe, for example, that more of our, in fact, every teacher, given the crisis we have, needs to have significantly better training in literacy. So we can't just do it as a kind of dipstick kind of approach. It has got to be something in which we actually immerse them into literacy training, because the fact is that you need a literacy background knowledge. A student needs to be literate about many different things, and teachers need to understand how to build the literacy capital of students in order to help them. So if you hold them back with the same teachers who are weak, it's not going to make any sense. And I think that's kind of the problem that we're having in the system, where we feel that we can hold back, but hold them back to whom? A part of why repeat has not really worked in terms of the research is that we tend to repeat students and then repeat the same pedagogy with them.
Yes.
That makes no sense. What you really want, and the schools where this work, they can advance them, because what they have done is that when they have diagnosed the problem, what they do is that they actually treat the problem and not just look at the symptoms and say, okay, holding them back because this is a tradition we have as a school. And it's more a punitive thing than I think a remedial thing.
Yes.
And we have got to be very careful about that kind of approach. If it is that when we're holding them back, it is not about addressing the problem.
Yes.
Rather than repeating the bad it's not necessarily bad, but pedagogy that does not address the issue.
Point made. So Dr. Lewis Folcom, so here's the thing now. If we are to set targets, in this mission to improve literacy, what are the increments the government should be aiming for? Not the government, all the stakeholders should be aiming for, and over what period? Are we to say, all right, we are 89 now, we're going to reorientate the timetable so you have more time for literacy and numeracy? We're going to invest more, as Principal Wright has said, in training teachers to do more remedial work and better remedial work where literacy is concerned. And we're also going to have a discussion with parents about the things that their child needs to undergo in order to graduate from the school system. Must we set small targets over a 4 or 5 year period, a 10-year period even, to get this done, or will it just magically happen by itself if we do the funding and do the teacher training?
Right, you seem to have all the answers. But let me go back to something that Principal Wright said that I think is very critical. That is, there's some research coming out of Portugal that states that if you repeat a student exactly what you said, you can't have them going back to the same teacher. You actually have to assess what is the problem and give that student who's repeating the support that he or she needs. That is when it works. So that's a key thing. Secondly, any improvement in literacy is going to take time, right? It's not the type of quick fix. Quick fixes don't work.
Yes.
In the long run, right? And it's multi-layered. So there are many components, there are many stakeholders when it comes to reading. There's what's happening with the family. So A lot of information needs to go out to families, and we have to really think about it in terms of our context. We're an oral culture, right? There are some families where they don't really have books. They're not really reading. People send a lot of voice notes. How do you encourage those parents to say, hey, in addition to buying maybe the toy that you're buying, buy a book? So there's that whole cultural shift. And how do we use our culture of storytelling to appease to the parents to say, hey, something like this, developing children's oral language capacity in whichever language, Jamaican English, Jamaican Creole, is important. Then there's the consideration of the language. Many students coming from Jamaican Creole and moving into adding this other language, our language, Jamaican English, to their language repertoire. And how do you equip teachers to manage that bilingual process? And then there is, you have two things in literacy, two kind of strands. You have that background knowledge that you want to facilitate. And then there is also the explicit instruction where phonics is concerned, and doing it consistently over time. And that's where the training comes in. And in late June to early July, those of us who have been trained in the early reading intervention training program are going to go out into the schools to train teachers in grades 1, 2, and 3 in various literacy pedagogy. And I'm looking forward to that. I hope the teachers who are listening are excited.
Yes.
Because this works, it can make a huge difference.
Hear you on that. That's all the time I have. Thank you very much, Dr. Yewande Lewis Folcom. Linvern Wright, thank you very much as well. And I certainly hope that the viewers would have taken some significant pointers and insight from this conversation. Certainly, I have given what both of